So we've covered the topic of diagnosis and regenerative therapies in the course of rehabilitation. The next topic is fitness. I think the most important thing is to recognize that it's not a good idea to let an injured horse get unfit. It's important to maintain a good baseline level of fitness during the course of rehabilitation. It's also important to have a horse at an exercise level and at a level of fitness that is appropriate for its injury and appropriate for the stage of healing. So that's sometimes a very fine balancing act and a very careful process to get that level just right, a level of exercise, a level of fitness during the course of healing. What I mean by that is people often ask me about swimming their injured horse. Swimming is a great exercise. Swimming is a useful way to exercise the limbs of a horse, but its primary purpose is to develop and maintain cardiovascular fitness. So that's a goal that you might not necessarily seek to achieve in the first phases of healing of an injury. You don't want a horse who's overfit on a tendon injury, for example, that can't handle the level of exercise that horse might be capable of. On the other hand, stimulating some exercise in that injured tendon is a good idea, and it's a matter of figuring out how to control that level of exercise and maintain a level of fitness that's appropriate for that tendon injury going forward. So that's a very fine line, and that's an important aspect of rehab that takes practice and repetition and constantly trying to know where you are and figure out just what's right, what's enough, what's too much, and staying below that too much line during the process as much as possible. So in the course of exercising an injured horse and finding that right balance for its injury, it's important to recognize throughout the process that it's important to maintain core strength. Same as in human athletes, where the maintenance of a good core is important to so many other issues. It's important to back pain, it's important to neck pain, it's important to shin splints. That concept holds very true in the case of a horse. So maintaining core strength, and often for us, developing core strength in a horse whose injury has something to do with a lack of core strength, is a scenario that we face every day. So we use several ways to accomplish that. Probably the most common, most readily available, and most practical way to do it is through the use of the Pessoa rig. Learning how to use the Pessoa rig appropriately, to ask a horse to maintain some engagement from behind, not in a severe way, but initially in a mild way, and then adding to the question as time goes on, for us is a useful tool. We do that with long lining and with lunging, even at the beginning at the walk, and that can be done really early in the course of an injury, and it could be a really useful tool to help maintain strength in an injured horse, and it can be done at really essentially all phases of injury. We rarely keep an injured horse in the stall, maybe in the first 10 days, but beyond that, they're moving and exercising, and the Pessoa rig is something that can be adopted early in the process when a horse has worked properly at the walk using that tool. The other issue that's important to us in the course of rehabilitating a horse, and this comes along really both in the early phase and later in the course of healing, is surfaces and training a horse to have the proper proprioception to be familiar with how they use their bodies and use their limbs on varying surfaces. So we tend to start a horse with a soft tissue injury, for example, on firm ground. And that helps us avoid the idea of overstraining the soft tissue injury. But soon enough during that phase, and I would say mid-phase of healing, not just the later phases of healing, we want to ask that same horse to work at different levels of exercise on all different kinds of surfaces. So we'd like to use 3 different surfaces, sort of a grass surface, a deeper surface that can be a mixture of wood chips and sand, and also something that would be more like a normal riding surface. We tend to avoid the synthetic surfaces for that process. We use a nice limestone that we try to maintain in a proper way. But the goal is to have different surfaces and have the horse adapt to understanding the effect of different surfaces on their limbs during all phases of the rehab process. So surfaces are important as well. In our own program, we tend to avoid what I would call a competition surface, and most of the competition surfaces these days are synthetic surfaces. The reason we do that is because I think it's important to have the concept of proprioception trained in your horse. So for me, that means training surfaces are more natural surfaces and various surfaces, whereas the competition surfaces that tend to be synthetic surfaces are more uniform. And I think that a horse who has had the opportunity to develop that sense of proprioception by virtue of experience and exercise on various surfaces then can come and cope with the artificial surfaces better. Really, we do need to consider the artificial surfaces as yet another way to develop proprioception, but for me, the variation of surfaces is very important to have, and it's important to have that proprioceptive capacity built in before you're exposing your horse to the artificial surfaces.